So now that we have a better understanding of the perception process, let's continue with the rest of Chapter 3. So one of my favorite theories is uncertainty reduction theory. Uncertainty reduction theory simply states that we as human beings like to know things. We like to reduce any uncertainty that we have towards a particular person or a particular thing. I know, the name pretty much says itself. So in this need to seek information, there are different ways that we can do that. One way would be a passive way. This is where we don't directly engage with whatever person or said thing that we want to find out more about. We maybe just observe them from a distance. So that new kid who you don't really know that well and you're curious about. In a passive approach, you would just maybe watch the way they walk, look at the clothes that they wear, maybe listen to them in class, but never actually engage directly. In the active approach, you are being more direct, but you're not being more direct with that person. In particular, you might be asking a friend and saying, hey, do you know person X? Can you tell me more about them? Again, you're being more active in your approach, but you're not being direct and getting information directly from the source. And then there's interactive. In this place, you would actually walk up to the person and get to know them. Hello, my name is, let me know more about who you are as a person. Now there are pros and cons of each different approach, and to some degree, we do all three of these approaches when we're getting to know somebody new. So neither one is better or worse. They're all kind of the same in different ways. Be aware that our perception can be influenced by our culture. Typically, we view people who have similar cultures to us as in-groupers. Because this person is like us, we probably have similar views, similar values, similar ways of being. Now, this sometimes is the case, yes. You can even see in the picture how we may approach the in-grouper of a handshake because that's what we're used to, where someone from a different culture may tend to bow. We may think, wow, bowing is weird. And that would be us thinking that the handshake is normal. However, we fail at times to consider the fact that not all in-groupers are just like us. Every person is distinct and unique. Furthermore, we sometimes tend to make things more complicated by making people out-groupers. That person is not like me, therefore they must be different and weird and I should keep them out of my group. At times, this has caused stereotypes to grow, prejudice to grow, and as you can see, putting people outside of your group for whatever reason can be harmful. But again, you can see how we are categorizing different people on similarities and differences. Now, when it comes to gender, we also tend to perceive people on how similar and how different they are from us. Sometimes there is some truth to the fact that the sexes do things differently. Scientists always come through and say that, well, men can more accurately perceive time and speed than women do. On the flip side, women are usually more adept to interpreting emotions and making connections between language than men are. But even given these biological differences that maybe are based in our brains, we are still quite similar when it comes to our communication styles. So saying that men do this and women do that, that's not exactly true. Usually we are treated a certain way as children and adapt to that certain way of communicating back. So as a little girl, I'm usually understanding that I should tend to be a little bit more quiet, I should be pretty sensitive to people's emotions, and I should not always be aggressive. Whereas male friends who said that they were taught to be rough and tough, that emotions didn't really matter, and that they need to be more upfront. Because of that, we may have similar communication styles overall, and maybe different communication styles overall. Because I do try to assert myself, while I have male friends who may not assert themselves. It really is based on the individual, not just the gender. So it's really important to challenge assumptions, especially as we grow to be a more accepting culture and we have more and more people expressing their gender identity. I think it's even more important in these days to understand how we have these ideas of what should be and what shouldn't be, but those have always been flexible. Society is the one who makes those rigid structures so rigid. Another influence on our perception is personality. Now, extroversion is how outgoing someone is, how likely they are to engage in interactions with other people. The opposite of this is introversion, so someone who's a little bit more reserved. Agreeableness is how friendly someone is. Conscientiousness is how determined that person seems and how goal-oriented that person seems. Neuroticism relates to emotional stability. So if someone's very neurotic, they may be a little all over the place and seem like they can't get control of their emotions. And then there's openness. So this is how open someone is to accepting new ideas and new beliefs, or even just listening to new ideas and new beliefs. Now, all of these have different effects on our personality. So if you're a very outgoing person, you're highly extroverted, then meeting new people seems great. You perceive small chats as the best way to get to know new people. Where if you're highly introverted, joining some small chat seems so exhausting. Why do I have to engage with other people? But again, you can see how these could affect our perception. On the opposite end, it can also affect how people perceive us. So if you're not so agreeable, if you're not so friendly, people may not want to engage with you. Right? If you seem highly neurotic, people may not want to come to you with a new problem because they think that you may not be emotionally ready to handle that problem. So you can see how these different ideas of our personality can affect how we perceive others and how others perceive us. Thinking about personality, it's important to consider implicit personality theory. Now, in this theory, it says that we as humans tend to generalize from traits. Now, what does that really mean? So, imagine that you and your new friend Bob have gone out. Now, you know that Bob is quite clumsy. He's tripped a few times. In fact, he's tripped 5 times. Every time you've gone out, he's tripped. And so you assume, yeah, Bob is super clumsy. But wait, what did we just do there? We just made Bob the clumsy person. We made clumsy a part of his personality. What if Bob isn't clumsy? What if it just happens to be that every single time we've seen him, there's been some object has caused him to trip? And that would be an error in our perception. Think about the quiet student in class. And you think, oh, well, they're super shy. Or they don't really know anything about the material because they're not talking about the material. It could be that they know everything about the material and they're just really tired that day. Or maybe they don't feel as though they have a loud voice and don't want to talk and have to overexert their voice. But you see how we can take one trait or one incident and make it into a full-blown, well, this is who that person must be. We usually tend to do this because we clump different traits together. So if someone is very quiet, we tend to assume that they must be shy and that they don't like going out and doing things with other people. That's not necessarily true. Implicit personality theory at work. So as we form perceptions of others, it's really important to think about how we want to be as accurate as possible and how we want to avoid those errors. A gestalt is just that, how we form first impressions of people. Now, our gestalts are usually quite positive. When you meet somebody for the very first time, You want to see the good in them, therefore you have a positivity bias. However, if you see any negative thing, any negative aspect to who they are as a person, you'll tend to think, well, everything they do and say must be from a negative space. It's because we have this idea that any negative characteristic about someone is a true characteristic. That maybe somebody can be friendly on the first day, but if they're not really a friendly person and they're actually quite mean, i.e. the negative part, then that will show up and that will actually be their true self. It could be, again, they just had a bad day and you just happen to catch them on those bad days or when they're really stressed out. Now, based on your gestalt that you have of someone, if you have a positive bias towards that person and they do something really, really well, you would probably have the halo effect. That, wow, this person's so amazing that I can't believe they accomplished this task in such a small time. Of course they would, because they're such an amazing person. That's the halo effect. It could be that they just use some shortcuts to work faster than you. But there's even the horn effect. In this case, you have a negative gestalt. You may think, well, of course they're turning in work late. They're just a lazy person overall. But again, you're using that negative gestalt to take a negative behavior to form who they are as a person. Now, on the opposite side of gestalts, that quick first impression, there is the algebraic impression. Now, this is where we take bit by bit, event by event, characteristic by characteristic, and use that to help shape the person and our view of who they are. So, you have a friend who's late one time. The next time, they're early. The next time, they're right on time. So, in an algebraic impression, you would think about all three of those different events and use that to shape how you see them. Be mindful that at any of these points with the gestalts or the algebraic impressions, we can form stereotypes. Stereotypes can be positive, such as, well, the person wearing glasses is the really smart person in class. That's positive because you're seeing them in a positive light, but it may not be true. It could be true. Or a negative stereotype, such as, well, all blondes are dumb. That's not true, right? There could be some dumb blondes out there, but there's definitely no way that all blondes are dumb. There are some really smart ones. So, if you find yourself in that weird space of, is my perception okay? Is it accurate? Do a perception check. Step 1, describe the behavior. What did you actually see? So, for example, my friend walked in late and they had a frown on their face. Then suggest interpretations. Why would someone do those behaviors? Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they came in late because their car broke down. Maybe they had to go to the bathroom last minute, or maybe they're just upset that they have to come to this particular class. And then seek verification. This is when you actually walk up to that person and say, I noticed that you were having a frown on your face. What's going on? You can see that by doing this process, you can understand more accurately how you're perceiving the situation. So it's important to be a good perceiver by realizing that perceptions can change over time. No perception has to stay one way for the rest of your life. Try to convey empathy. So on those days where someone is maybe a little upset, think about, if I were in that person's shoes, how would I act? And try to keep that positive impression of who they are. Try to avoid ethnocentrism. This idea that our culture is better, we're number one, anybody else is different and weird, because that can create some in-group and out-group tensions. Try to embrace world-mindedness. This idea that we are all one large world and we're all having our own share in shaping it together. So that is our review over perception and how we perceive others in our interpersonal relationships.